spots of Western civilization, the Acropolis in Athens, Greece. This group of American students behind me listening to the guide are just concluding a tour of 4 European cities. But they're not ordinary college student tourists. In fact, sightseeing was not the main purpose of their trip. These are 28 members of the famous Florida State University Flying High Circus, who are just concluding a series of performances at the Olympic Stadium here in Athens. Right now, they're listening to all the history and legend about the Parthenon, where the democratic form of government was first practiced. A little while ago, they saw the Herod Atticus, a 2,000-year-old amphitheater right by the Acropolis.
Roman, that's a third big break to do it here.
What did this date of that?
I don't know, but I'd sure like to work here. I'll tell you what. All right, I got you. We'll work. Come over here. All right, you sit down right there. Come here, Howard. You have a right seat right there. All right, now. Okay. All right, ready? All right, up, all right.
3.5 weeks and 1,200 miles before, the circus tour began in Barcelona, Spain, where the performances were given in the Plaza de Catalunya. In the very center of the tour, a former circus professional, Ad Gilbert.
Our primary objective is not providing entertainment for the public. It's providing a worthwhile activity for the students. The average student that gets interested in circus usually has no previous background of any sort. We do get a few from Sarasota High School that have had some circus experience in the high school, but about 99% of our candidates for the circus have never participated in any activity that's even remotely related.
Well, my freshman year I saw it on television, and I said, this is our university, and I said, well, next year I'm going to try and see what happens.
I was used to doing something in the afternoons after you get out of school, out of classes, and I was wandering around the afternoons lost, and I didn't have anything to do, and I was starting to put on weight, and I needed something to do. That was the main thing. I knew it would keep me in good shape.
In my senior year of high school, I watched it on television while they were in Fort Lauderdale, and that's when I decided I'd join. I was sitting there with my mother, and I said, Mom, I'm going to be in that circus when I go there. I wanted it, but I never thought I'd be able to, and here it is. My cousin was in the circus about 15 years ago, and I just always wanted to be in it. I used to go and watch her, and she used to take me out and swing on the trapeze and everything, and since then I've always wanted to be in the circus.
Actually, when I went to Florida State University, I didn't even know that they had a circus there. And I walked out there one day and saw the circus lot and saw the rigging on the lot, and I actually joined the circus to learn about the rigging.
Whatever their original reasons for joining the circus were, the young students were delighted at the opportunity to see Europe and show off their performing skills in a variety of difficult and sometimes dangerous acts.
The most dangerous act in our show, I believe, is one that most people would not recognize as being dangerous. That's the Rolla Rolla. Ron Tracy is our understander on the Rolla Rolla. He's a senior this year at Florida State. Our girl in the Rolla Rolla act, June LaSalvia, is a freshman and has the natural physical characteristics which make her desirable for a partner in a Rolla Rolla act, in that she weighs about 90 pounds.
Ron is a tremendous performer. He's steady, and I have a lot of confidence in him, and I think that's about the most important thing for a girl, to have confidence in her partner.
The most important part for the girl when working roller is to become sensitive to her partner down below, to his every movement. There's times when she must freeze and not move at all.
I have to be aware of his movements, and sometimes I could feel the roll being a little shaky. We talk a lot during the act. No matter how many times we do it, he still says, okay, turn around. And just hearing his voice sort of makes it a little better. He sounds very steady and very confident. and this brings out my confidence.
It's hard to say what trick the audience likes most. They seem to become entranced or just in a daze watching it to see, I don't know, whether we're going to fall or not.
In the program of ground and aerial acts was one seldom seen either in America or on the continent. Casting is similar to a flying trapeze act, except that the bodies and arms of the two men serve as trapezes, putting a considerable strain on their legs.
You need two boys who are really willing to suffer, and two rather small and extremely agile girls, because weight is an extreme factor in this act as far as handling these girls. And the boys jokingly call the cradle that they work in the torture rack, because it is quite painful in the learning stages of the act.
I can tell when I'm hanging upside down almost how the trick's going to be when I see her leave the bar. If I see that they're having some trouble, I start looking out. And some people think it hurts to fall in the net. Well, it doesn't. It's a sort of a sweet relief to get to the net after an act.
First performance before a European audience is a hit, and Lynn Mitchell, Linda Phillips, Don Johnston, and Fred Hoover are gratified to find their act can cross the ocean successfully. The first leg of the four-country tour was a rough one for the Flying High Troupe. Immediately after arriving, they had to start setting up their extensive rigging. A 12-hour job they barely finished in time to go into the first of two back-to-back shows. It wasn't until the second day, after a much-needed and well-deserved sleep, that they had a chance to realize they were in Spain, in its second largest and most colorful city. One of the many sights they took in was the 200-foot column, topped by the statue of Columbus, in the Port of Peace Plaza. A replica of the Santa Maria was moored at a nearby pier where a group of the Florida State girls met after a shopping tour. By happy coincidence, the United States Navy, on leave from the carrier Roosevelt, arrived on the scene and, undaunted by the fact they were outnumbered 3-1, offered to take the girls on a tour of Columbus's flagship.
There's more in Roosevelt.
Probably not satisfactory.
Would you like to go aboard?
Oh, yeah.
The last show in Barcelona was performed under circumstances as difficult as the first one. It started raining in the early part of the evening show and continued steadily during the entire program. In spite of the hazards to footing presented by the slick, wet marble, the performers went ahead in true show-must-go-on style. The last show in Spain was a turning point for the Florida State students. They had become adjusted to being in a foreign country and had learned that their earlier apprehensions about foreign audiences were unfounded. The response to their acts was enthusiastic and friendly, and the young performers looked forward with confidence to their next stop, the capital of the Riviera, Nice, France.
Most of the places we went to in Nice, they could speak English.
So we really didn't have too much of a problem there.
I tried some French food. I don't even know what you call it, but it was pretty good.
I like the food for maybe 1 or 2 meals, but not all the time. I'd like a good old hamburger every now and then. But when I go in a restaurant, I can't read the menu. I just take potluck.
The prices are maybe just a little bit higher.
I really enjoyed Nice. The reason being that it was a resort area and it was very similar to Miami Beach, and I'm from Miami, and so I guess I felt more at home at Nice than I did in any other place.
We don't wear bathing suits like that back in Nice very good.
Well, I think the main cultural shock were the bikinis. The bathing suits were a lot skimpier than they are in America.
The Riviera should be that way. It just seems like, the way it should be.
While the bathing attire on the Pebble Beach were a little strange to them, the group lost little time changing into their American-type swimsuits to take advantage of Nice's main assets: the sun, the sky, and the warm Mediterranean Sea. This was their first day in the resort city, and in a few hours they would have to go to the Parc de Verdun and join the rest of the troupe in setting up the rigging in the open theater for the first show. But right now they could relax and enjoy the perfect weather and each other's company.
The circus is a lot of fun from the standpoint that you get to know these people real well, and they're all a lot of fun.
I'm around them so much that I'm afraid that, if we started dating or something and we got mad with each other, then we wouldn't be able to work anymore. It might ruin an act, a good act or something.
The boys aren't like other boys on campus. They're more like brothers. It's almost like a family.
You've got to work with somebody, and I can't think of anybody who'd be more fun to work with than girls.
I didn't think too much about the social aspect in the beginning, but once I was in, I realized how good it was, and that's where I met my fiancé.
It's fun to work out physically, and I enjoy performing in front of an audience, as well as just being with the kids in the show.
The girls are all athletic, and athletic girls tend to be beautiful.
That quartet adagio act that we have working right now is the best I've ever had since I've taught amateur circus. And this is because these students have pride in their act. Lynn Mitchell has done an extraordinary job in our adagio act for only 1 year's work in the routine. She's small, she's agile, and she's got courage. She'll give it 110% all the time.
Oh, at first I was pretty scared, but I really have a lot of faith in my catchers, and I never really think about it.
Ray and I don't have to worry about anything. It's just Lynn, because she makes a lot of flips, and she comes out wrong. Pretty bad. An audience does make it. You have to be rewarded. I mean, when you get good response from the audience, it really helps a lot. I think they kind of like the jump rope.
I think that's the one they enjoy the most, though, is the jump rope.
In an adagio quartet act, the boys who swing the girl must be tall and strong. John O'Kelly and Randy Buchanan are all of that. But according to John, mishaps do occur.
Sometimes we skim her rear end on the ground if we're not careful.
Over 100 students participate in Circus, but only 28 of them could be taken on a European tour. As a consequence, many of the troupe had a double in brass, appearing in 2 or more acts on the program. Besides being one of the girls in the casting act, Linda Phillips of Dayton, Ohio, performs at the top of the balance perch pole. Her partner, Don Johnston, a criminology major from Cocoa Beach, Florida, also is in casting as well as the 3-lane breakaway act. and a fine sense of balance are a must for the man at the bottom of the long perch pole. As a safety measure in this act, a wire is attached to a harness on the girl, run over the aerial frame and held by a spotter on the ground. Another hit with the French audience in the Theater Verdu was the double trapeze act, a series of tricks performed by a boy and girl on a stationary trapeze. The performers, Janie Lane, a junior from Lake City, Florida, and Charlie Park, an industrial arts major from Savannah, Georgia. Hours of practice plus the necessary physical ability are very important in circus. But there is another aspect to performing that does not come easy to some of the students.
Well, the most difficult part of the show for me was learning to become a good showman and learning to sell the act and make it appeal to the audience.
Some acts that are appreciated in the United States are not appreciated here, and some that are just sort of mediocre there, they like here.
A lot of times you don't even know that the audiences are there, to tell you the truth.
I love performing in front of an audience. I guess I'm a ham at heart. I just eat up that applause, and I just feel like I'm on top of the world when I'm out there performing.
When you have an audience, a large audience, and they're really fired up, you can do a better act.
The finale of the double trapeze act, the neck loop spin.
The secret of doing a neck loop spin is finding the proper place on your neck to put the loop. If you put it too low, you can pinch your blood vessel and faint while you're doing the spin. If you put it too high, you'll slip out. Consequently, the best place for me is to fold my ears down and put it right over my ears.
Next stop on the circus tour, Florence, Italy.
Let's see, Florence was the city with the widest streets, but even they were very small in certain sections. Florence was very impressive, especially the works of art. I think Michelangelo was about everywhere in that city.
And the thing that most impressed me about Florence was the artwork and the sculptures and David.
I only wish that I could have spent a little more time there to see some of the things and meet some of the people.
With only one show scheduled in Italy, the troupe's stay in Florence was necessarily short. But in the 2 days they were there, the students were greatly impressed with the beautiful city and the nearby town of Fiesole, where they performed at a 2,000-year-old Roman amphitheater.
I think that the theater at Fiesole in Florence is probably the most enjoyable place that I've ever worked. The very thought of having worked or working in an arena that is that old is overwhelming. The Italian audience was very receptive to us.
The three-lane breakaway, a standard in circus repertoire, features Janie Lane, Don Johnston, and Fred Hoover.
It's an act that requires a great deal of teamwork, because we have three people that must coordinate their movements quite precisely for them to have any success at all. The girl, Janie Lane, has been with us for 3 years. She's well coordinated, and she's got a lot of courage, too. The first time I asked Janie to do this, she was scared to death because there's nothing but the ground out there in front of you, and I don't blame her for being afraid.
Goodness, the first time they told me to jump off, I said, no, thank you. Matter of fact, I stood on that cradle and cried for about 5 minutes, and then finally jumped.
The finale on the program is the Flying Trapeze Act, and a gray-haired lady in the audience is especially interested because her nephew, Nucci Catarzi, is the star performer. Nucci, descended from generations of circus professionals, met his aunt for the first time on this trip. The all-important catcher in the act, Larry Camp, a biology major from Hialeah, locks to his trapeze as Brent Pichard starts the act off. The graceful young lady in the flying routine is Dorothy Gilmore of Pensacola. Working up to a try for a triple somersault, Nucci Catarzi does a fine 2.5. Brent Pichard's double with a twist breaks up the audience. And now it's time for Nucci's triple. He's one of the few flyers in the world to accomplish this nearly impossible trick. A very near miss. Since leaving Florida, Nucci has had trouble with the triple, although he did catch one in the last show at Nice. But there's no second show in Florence, and his relatives never did get to see the fabulous triple. The graceful drops to the net bring the show to a close. Tomorrow, the troupe will have to dismantle all the rigging, load it on trucks, and then by train, boat, and bus, make the long journey to Athens, where they'll wind up the tour. Or the Florida State Circus Tour of Europe, after we pause for station identification. And among the latter was hand balancing, in which the 3 male members of the Flying Act proved that they are just as much at home on the ground as they are in the air. Because of his strength and size, as well as his personality, Larry Camp is perfectly suited for the anchorman role, and his steadiness is all important to the agile acrobatics of his partners, Nucci Catarzi and Brent Pichard. And style that these three young men show in the flying act obviously carries over into all the other acts they participate in. While Circus is definitely an avocation with them, their performances could not be more professional. Among the other ground acts that pleased the Greek spectators were the bicycle act, in which three pretty girls and a lone male demonstrate that a bicycle can be built for four, and a juggling act featuring George Miller and Dave Brown. Miller is a high IQ mathematics major and is generally acknowledged to be the brain of the circus troupe, while his taller partner, Dave Brown, has an extrovert personality and a rubbery face that make him the clown of the group, both on and off stage. In the bicycle act are Angela Seymour, Judy Bigelow, and Dale Dunsmore. And the young man surrounded by and occasionally overburdened with all the femininity is Charlie Park. After their juggling stint, Dave Brown and George Miller team up again, this time as high stilt walkers, and they are billed naturally as two young men trying to get up in the world. But because of the restricted area they have to work in, they spend most of the act trying to get through, around, over, or under the rigging lines. State Circus clown act was a big hit in every country on the tour. Brent Pichard, as a vociferous hot dog vendor, starts it off in the stand. A customer for the world's longest and least appetizing-looking hot dog is finally found. But there seems to be some trouble about the price, as well as the flavor. The dramatic proceedings in the clown skit owe more to the Marx Brothers than Noel Coward. The customer seems to have something more than mild stomach distress after a few bites of the hot dog. And a doctor is called. The case is serious enough to require a nurse, complete with operating table. Dr. Katarzi's zeal obviously exceeds his competence. MD, in this instance, stands for Mad Doctor. The nurse seems to have very little interest in her professional duties. The suffering patient is subjected to further indignities. Even in his agony, he's justifiably skeptical of the physician. Dr. Katarzi calls for an anesthetic. A very old, well-worn shoe will do the knockout job. This is a case that would baffle the finest medical minds, such as Casey or Kildare, but not Katarzi. During the course of the delicate operation, the doctor removes a very large wrench and a length of change. In spite of the fact that he is bitten in the course of his surgical explorations, the fearless physician proceeds to remove a very lively object that seems to be a hostile tapeworm. A mighty struggle ensues. The plot thickens to almost total obscurity at this point, but the denouement is not far off. Punchline to this gripping drama, the doctor finds a dog, a hot dog. It may not be art, and the AMA has conspicuously withheld its endorsement, but it was fun for audience and players alike. The youthful enthusiasm of the Florida State performers had a lot to do with the success of the shows in Europe, but another reason was the smooth programming wherein each act immediately followed the preceding one. While the attention of the audience was centered on the ground acts, the other students were quietly and efficiently setting up the cradle and all other equipment for the three-lane breakaway. The most difficult trick in the act is the three-man hang, and it's hardest on the middleman, Don Johnston, who does a back lever while holding a spinning girl in his teeth. Is dropped to the concrete floor for the final trick, the breakaway. It's a long way down.
Sometimes it can be an awfully lonely feeling up high, even though there are two people with you. It's real strange. There's so much open air around you. I really don't know what it is. But just every now and then, even now, sometimes you'll go up and you won't really be afraid, but you just won't feel as certain as you do at other times.
Don Johnston and Fred Hoover. Next on the program, the High Wire Act. Featured in the excellent High Wire Act are Dale Dunsmore, Bobby Gay, and jack of many circus trades, Larry Kent.
We have three people in our wire walking act, two boys and one girl. The girl, Dale Dunsmore from Sarasota, has had some experience in circus in the high school in Sarasota.
I really don't think it's hard. If the wire's rigged right, it's just like walking on a sidewalk. I don't know. I guess I've been walking it for so long.
I think the most difficult thing to learn about walking a high wire is the psychological hazard that exists.
Everything they say about psychological fear about high wire is true. I know our practice wire is approximately 7 feet high. And the first time I did a 2 high with Bobby, I was scared. I've fallen out of that trick once, but it was only 7 feet high. When I got up there and saw, you know, the net and that marble floor, I was scared out of my mind.
One of the boys on the wire act, Bobby Gay, walked wire for me in the high school circus in Sarasota. He's sort of like the Rock of Gibraltar on the high wire. You just don't shake Bobby loose.
And he talked to me all the way across. You know, I kept saying, I'm gonna fall, I'm gonna fall. But he talked me out of it.
Many people have asked us about the hazardous nature of the circus activity. And our experience has shown us that it's no more hazardous than an intramural program in sports activities. No one has ever been hurt to the point that they were classified as being in critical condition. We've had a few broken bones, very few, but nothing of any great hazardous nature to the performer. I couldn't say that there's any one thing that I have to do to cause these students to overcome a fear. The only thing that I try and tell them is that if they're going to work in circus with me as their coach, that they've got to have faith in what I tell them to do. And if I ask them to do a trick or try a trick, they must have faith that I'm not asking them to do something that they can't do or that would cause them any bodily harm.
Pichard got off to a bad start on the tour. Because of the marble floor of the plaza in Barcelona, the high wire poles could not be firmly mounted, and as a consequence, the wire had a good deal of slack in it. Dale, Bobby, and Larry went through one very shaky performance, one they won't forget for a while. And then the act was dropped for the rest of the tour until the circus reached the stadium in Athens, where the rigging could be set up properly.
I really believe that the flying return act which we have right now is as good as any in the world anywhere. We're doing as many or more good tricks than any flying act I know of. Brent Pichard is one of the cleanest leapers I've ever seen. He can really sell an act. When he finishes a trick and mounts the board, if he can't make an audience applaud, we might as well pack up and go home. The girl in the routine, Dorothy Gilmore, is one of 2 or 3 women in the world that does a double somersault. And really, this is quite extraordinary to find an amateur that's doing a trick that's done only by 1 or 2 other women in the world. Catarzi is a screwball. In high school, when I had him working in the high school show down there, we called him Nervous Nucci. He is one of the finest leapers in the flying act business anywhere, there's no doubt about it. And anybody who has accomplished a triple somersault has got to have a lot of perseverance and a lot of courage.
Now it's time for Nucci Catarzi's triple. He missed it in the 2 previous performances, and since it's his last chance to catch it on this tour, the pressure is on. act of the last show of the tour, and it's a happy, relieved group of flyers that drop to the net. Catcher Larry Kent. Dorothy Gilmore. And finally, Brent Pichard. The justly famed flying act of the Florida State Flying High Circus. Although it was hectic and tiring at times, the European tour was an exciting and memorable experience for the 28 student circus performers. For a long time, they'll be talking about the time they visited Fort Montjuic, overlooking the city and harbor of Barcelona. The strange feeling of performing in the middle of the city, and that last rainy performance in Spain. The food and customs may have been strange, and the Riviera may have reminded them a little of Miami Beach, but the culture shocks were mainly pleasant ones. The thrill of performing in Fiesole, in the ancient Roman amphitheater, which was built 100 years before Christ, made any previous history lesson pale in comparison. They'll remember the wonderful audiences and the fact that the shows got such warm and appreciative receptions in 4 different countries. And on that last day in Greece, the hand balancers imagined they could hear the ghostly applause of another audience, 2,000 years old.
The goddess worshipped in this temple in the antiquity, according to the mythology I said, she had never married. And so this is the temple of the virgin goddess Athene. This temple has, naturally, the classical divisions and the classical dimensions.
It has been quite a trip for these youngsters, their coaches, and their chaperones, one they'll never forget. They've had a great time, and so have we. We hope you have, too. This is Jack Whitaker from the Acropolis in Athens, Greece, saying so long for the CBS Sports Spectacular and the Flying High Circus of Florida State University.